Welcome to Grassroots Iowa, conversations at the crossroads of faith and politics. I'm your host, Jeremy Higgins, and I'm coming to you from right here in the heart of Iowa, where real conversations about faith, freedom, family, and the future of our state, they're not just welcome, they're necessary. Today, we're diving deep with a man who's lived the Iowa story by choice, not by birth. Jim Carlin grew up in Massachusetts. He served in the United States Army, earned his law degree, and chose Sioux City, Iowa as the place to build a life, raise a family, and serve his community. A longtime trial attorney, nonprofit leader, and founder of the Iowa Liberty Network, Jim spent years in the Iowa House and Senate fighting for constitutional conservatism, parental rights, medical freedom, and the values that make our state strong. Now, Jim is running today for an open U.S. Senate seat, bringing his faith-driven perspective and a track record of standing up for limited government, life, liberty, and the rural communities that power Iowa's economy. In this conversation, we hope to explore Jim's personal religious awakening and how that shaped his journey to bold conservative leadership. We'll talk about what's at stake for Iowa families, the rising costs, education, agriculture, veterans care, and protecting our freedoms in an age of big government overreach. And we'll ask the hard questions about what it truly means to bring Iowa's grassroots voice to Washington. Jim Carlin believes government is not the solution, it's often the problem. Today, we're going to hear why he's running and what he's learned from, that time in the State House and how his faith and principles can still guide politics in these challenging times. Stick around for an honest and engaging dialogue that you're not going to hear on a lot of those national cable shows. This is Grassroots Iowa, where faith meets politics at the crossroads. So let's welcome our guest, U.S. Senate candidate Jim Carlin. Jim, thanks so much for joining us today. It's great to have you on the program. You're a longtime friend, and I got to tell you, I'm blessed to be sitting across from you. Welcome.
Thank you, Pastor Jeremy. I count it an honor to be here with you today. I know that we both have some common threads on fighting these fights, and
yes, sir.
Honored to be here with you today.
Thank you. Yeah, I really do think that our state is at a crossroads, and it's up to us, as individuals, to do our part. And I love the role that you play. I'll tell you with that, why don't we start with, in a sense, your why? Mm-hmm. We've talked about a lot of things that you've already done with your life. You've lived a long, healthy life. As a matter of fact, you just showed me a video of benching 295 pounds. Super impressed. Yep. But now you're at a place where there's this open Senate seat, and man, the Lord's calling you to walk through that door. Walk us through how you got there.
Well, my public service life began really a long time ago. I actually started out running a nursing home visitation program, and then did some missions work in Kenya.
Oh, I love that.
Started a nonprofit with some friends, and just met some basic needs on education and on nutrition in Kenya for kids there, and just absolutely loved being involved in that. I did some football coaching with a Christian coach named Steve Ryan at Morningside College in Sioux City.
That's awesome.
Great Christian mentor for a lot of football players. And then I felt led by the Lord to get into the political realm, which was not really something I wanted to do.
Yeah, I'd imagine so. I in conversations that I have with folks in your arena, that's a common thread. God makes a provision, and we're supposed to walk through that door, right? So I appreciate that you've done that. Yeah. So you were voted, 2017 into the Iowa House, and then there was a special election and moved over to the Iowa Senate for a total of 6 years. Is that right?
That's right. No, I ran for the Iowa House in 2016, the year President Trump won his election, and also won the 2020 election. But
yeah, right. Another conversation.
Yeah, that's another conversation. Yeah. But no. So yeah, I served in the House for a year. My Senate colleague, Bill Anderson, retired a year early to take on a job. And so that seat became open. So I literally ran 3 years in a row.
Oh, wow.
Which
no easy task.
Yeah. Lots of fun there, but no, I was able to get some good things done. And I think, honestly, I think the Lord orchestrated a lot of things I was able to get done. I was just in place to where he could put it all together, and all I had to do really is just cooperate with them, and we did see some pretty wonderful things happen.
Amen. And I love looking back at your track record there in the Iowa Senate. It's impressive. And then after your tenure there, you started the Iowa Liberty Network.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about the heart behind that and some of
Sure.
what you accomplished there as well.
Well, I did actually run against Senator Grassley a few years ago.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
In the Senate primary, and I did not win that primary. I think we are in much better shape this time out than we were then. But I met a lot of people like you, Pastor Jeremy, around the state. A lot of really good, grounded Christian people across the state, and constitutional conservatives. And when that part of the race was over, I took the people I met and said, we should really be a little bit more intentional about getting Christian conservatives elected at the state level. And so met with some friends, a lot of them that we put together a thing called the Iowa Liberty Network, and the vision for it is pretty simple. We recruit strong conservatives to run for office, and we help them with a candidate school, with fundraising and mentoring when they get there, with like-minded legislators that are already there.
Wow, a candidate school. So, that's one of the things, I've often thought about. I didn't know if it's in, the cards or God's will for me to run for
We'd love
state
to have you
office someday. But, I have, I'll admit I've felt the tug from time to time. And I do feel like the Lord has put it on my heart. And so I've been praying about that. And I've even talked to you about that. And the candidate school is an interesting part of that, because I think a lot of people go into politics maybe with the right heart, but not an understanding of, well, what's next? What happens when I win the office? If I win the office, and how do we get our feet going there?
Sure.
So how does that work? You put a group of people together that have worked in these areas, and
they know it all we have 22 sitting legislators at the State House now. They meet on Tuesday mornings for a Bible study.
Awesome. I love that.
And so you're not alone when you walk in the door. Your Christian conservative values are going to be backed by like-minded colleagues, and they're veterans. A lot of them have been there quite a while.
Oh, cool.
Sandy Salmon is a dear friend of mine. She's been there a long time. She actually put together our candidate school.
Nice.
We have templates for everything. So really, a lot of the work in running a campaign is done. You're given the templates and the connections, and mentored by people who have been through it. And then once you get there, the really cool part is you're going to have friends that are going to help you.
Important, yeah.
So, because you're going to face some challenges where
beyond the shadow of a doubt, it's a difficult realm, no matter how you approach it. And you should know that. As a church, we pray constantly for, the political leaders of this land, even the ones that, I'm not super fond of. As a matter of fact, I think I'm driven more to pray for them and for the Lord to intervene in their lives and lead them and to help them make good decisions than oftentimes the ones that, are walking in a faith base already. But certainly we're committed to praying for folks on both sides of the aisle. But I think that, there's, such an important part of what you just said. When you get there, you have that kinship already, and you have an established, maybe even accountability group where, you're not only learning how to, perform well in government, but let's face it, being led through Bible studies and having times of prayer, that's so valuable for these folks in those roles. Let's talk a little bit about your faith journey.
Sure.
From what I read, and I think we've talked about this in years past, you were kind of raised Catholic, or at least early in your life?
I was raised Catholic. There's a lot of wonderful things about the Catholic faith that I still draw from. The foundational family piece to Catholicism passes. That aspect of Catholicism was foundational to marriage, family, commitment. raising,
Some
all
of the
of those
loudest
things.
voices for the right to life conversation comes out
They
of the
are.
Catholic Church too.
Oh
And
yeah.
so I think that's
No, they
impressive.
are. They are, and politically, they're very engaged.
Oh.
I meet a lot of great Catholics across the state that are engaged. But um, when I was going to law school, you get through these moments in life where you maybe you're going to listen, maybe you're a little bit more open to listening. And I came home from law school one day and I turned on the TV and Pat Robertson was
Okay.
on the TV, and like any, I wasn't particularly interested in listening to Pat Robertson at
Sure.
the time at all, really, but he said something that grabbed me. He said, "Well, you're in the driver's seat. How's that working out for you?"
Wow. Yeah,
And
really.
that one question was like, actually, I'm not that happy with the way things are. And I listened to him.
Yeah.
And he got to the end of his sermon and he said, will you consider, are you going to give the driver's seat of your life over to God? Which, surrendering.
Sure.
And I said to the Lord, I said, God, I don't even know if you're real.
Right.
But if you're real and you show me you care, because I wasn't actively practicing any kind of faith in any
Sure.
meaningful way. But I said, if you're real and you show me you care, I'm in. And I asked him to forgive me. Like, it took a while.
Yeah.
And but the next morning I woke up and I knew I'd never heard about being born again, but I knew I was different. I mean, I knew I was a different person.
That's awesome.
And it was awesome. And the Lord has been very faithful to show me that he cares, like a friend like no other.
Amen.
There's nobody whose friendship can compare with the friendship of Jesus. There just isn't. And people that really know that.
Yeah, when you learn to put your trust in the Lord,
Yeah,
something
you
in
can.
this life changes. There's that, age-old passage in the book of Proverbs, chapter 3, verses 5 and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean
Amen.
not on your own understanding.
Amen.
In all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your path.
Amen.
We're kind of raised in opposition of that, where, we're told to, do whatever we can to climb the corporate ladder and,
Right.
create the life that we want. And, it's going to be up to us. And, we learn to trust in ourselves. But, when you learn, and the word you used, surrender, is such a key part of that. When you surrender to the Lord and you really put your trust in him, man, the world changes. And what seems impossible, or what seemed impossible before, all of a sudden, well, it's not that big a deal. And, of course, Scripture tells us, I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. So,
Amen.
yeah, I love that. I had a similar version of a conversation like that. I was raised in a good Christian home, and spent my time running from God. And I always, I think revered God, but I didn't love him and fear him the way that he deserved to be loved and feared, honored, really.
Yeah.
And so I love it when I hear from strong men of faith, strong women of faith, that the Lord has brought them to that same conclusion, that without me, you have nothing. With me and in me, you can accomplish all things. And, that's, I think, one of the strongest attributes or characteristics that a man of faith can have, especially stepping into a political realm. So that was, you said during college or military?
It's during law school. So
Okay.
I think I was a second-year law student. And that's when I made that decision. And because he showed me he was real, then that raises another question. And it's, what am I here to do?
Amen.
And that completely changes the paradigm of your life, because then there's accountability, but there's also responsibility. But then actually an adventure starts, and you see him put together these improbable pieces where he makes it very clear to you he's watching you. Amen. He cares about you. He wants you to succeed. He's patient with you, very patient with you. And I, you know, he's kind of written a bunch of stories along the way on the journey where he authored them, and
Right.
it's very cool to be part of those stories.
Yeah.
And also he weaves you into the stories of other people in like a beautiful tapestry of connecting you on a heart level to a lot of good people, and together, you walk through this amazing journey with the dearest friend you could ever have.
That's so cool. Um, I love that you called it an adventure, because that really is the Christian walk.
It is.
It's such an adventure, and the Lord can take you to some of the most amazing places. You talked about when you finally saw the Lord for who He was. I think about Saul of Tarsus on that road to Damascus when Jesus revealed Himself, and Saul finally saw Jesus for who He was. He asked the question, "Lord, what would you have me to do?"
Yeah.
And that changed his life.
Changed the whole thing.
Literally from that second to the next, he was a completely different person and on a different
So
journey.
true.
And,
So true.
it sounds like that's what the Lord did in your life. I
He
mean,
did.
that's certainly a part of my story as well. Thank God we were never as off course as Saul of Tarsus, but, nonetheless.
Oh, I was pretty.
Right.
No.
I just love that. That's such an important part of your faith journey. Now, with that faith journey, I think a lot of the listeners are going to want to hear your stance, pro-life stance. Where do you stand in that realm, and what kinds of things are you willing to do to fight at the federal level?
Sure.
I had Brad Sherman in here last week, and we were talking about the overturning of Roe versus Wade, and that bringing the really the issue back to the state level. And his argument is, that it should be at the federal level. And there is a strong argument for that if you look to the Constitution and, our early documents, and, this inalienable right we have to life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, and life being such an important part of that. Talk to us about where you stand and where you maybe can see taking that fight.
Well, I think our lives are supposed to be defined by our humanity towards one another. And, to any Democrat who tells me they're pro-choice and insists on that stance, my first question to them is, if your mother were to have a conversation with Hillary Clinton or me, and your life and the lives of your children and your grandchildren were on the line, who would you want her to listen to?
Right.
You'd want her to listen to me, because now you see the scope of what's at stake.
Yeah, that's a strong point.
And
wasn't it Ronald Reagan that said everybody who's pro-choice is, already been born? Like,
right.
That's what you're talking
already
about.
Been born.
They've had the right to come forth from their mother's womb into this world. Man, that's important.
Oh, it's like when it's your life, it becomes real.
Right.
And I've told a story that I know you've heard about, talking a woman out of getting an abortion.
Right.
And then
I love
15 years later, seeing a picture of that same little girl on a family farm in Nebraska. And now that young lady is 24, pursuing an education. And like the reality of that, she's part of a family. She has a bunch of friends. She's living, and right now I think we're at 68 million abortions. What have we lost?
Right.
It's incalculable.
Right. The kinds of
the loss.
minds that could help shape and form our society, the inventions.
Can't even fathom.
You
can't even fathom what's been lost. We don't know what's been lost. We know we're struggling economically in no small measure because of that.
Right.
But on a spiritual level, what has our country lost on the other side of all that?
Right.
All that bloodshed. What have those mothers lost? The generational implications, I don't know. Could we even begin to know what was lost as a result of that? But, there's a very simple verse in the Bible that Jesus talked about. Do unto others as you would have done unto you. So when you tell me you're pro-choice,
Hmm.
would you want that done to you?
Right.
If
Yeah.
the answer to that is no, then I think, you can't do it
Right.
and that is kind of what has defined me legislatively is that one simple question. Would I want this done to me if I was on the wrong side of it?
Sure.
The answer is no, then
Right.
that's your conscience talking to you, isn't it? So,
Amen. Well, so
yeah.
like with Iowa, we have the heartbeat bill.
Mhm.
And I think that that's a great start.
Yeah.
I'm one of those guys that understands that you can't score a touchdown
You
typically, and you do that
Sure.
normally by, making first downs, 10 yards
Right.
at a time,
Right.
it's not totally out of the question
Sure.
for a long bomb to come out, but for the
Mhm.
most part, you don't set up an offense that way. You
Right.
take 10 yards at a time. You look
Right.
for the next first down, and
Mhm.
you're eventually going to get into that end zone. And
Sure.
I think that, what we've done here in the state of Iowa is great.
Mhm.
We've really started to speak and to speak boldly for the unborn. How do we take that to the federal level?
Well, I think a life at conception constitutional amendment, something along those lines.
Yeah.
I just the problem is we're inundated with so much deception as it relates to our own humanity and regard for one another that
Right.
you don't see the reality of really what you're doing and what's really going on. And I think advocacy, exposure, bringing the reality of of the life, dignity, value, destiny of each one of us should define us. And I think you get in there, you find out how the process works, and that's what I did with 3 Senate friends on the heartbeat bill. I didn't have the idea. I went home and I prayed about it because we weren't going to pass pro-life legislation. And I said, what do I do, God? I mean,
Right.
we had the governor's office, the Senate, and the House. We couldn't pass it. They're like,
Hmm.
no, we're not going to bring it to the floor. And I'm like, well, why not?
Right.
And I went home and I prayed, and I asked the Lord for some guidance, and he directed me to talk to a Senate colleague, Rick Bertrand,
Hmm.
who's a senator from Sioux City. And I said, Rick, I prayed about this, and I felt like you were the guy to talk to. And he said, really? But he didn't look taken back by that at all. He said, okay. And he came back the next day, and he said to me, I think I have an idea.
Huh.
He said, if you and me can get 2 other senators to vote no on the budget, I think we got them.
Oh, wow.
And Rick was right. 2 nights later, 2:30 in the morning, 2:20 in the morning, May 18th, we were debating the heartbeat bill. So he hit a home run with that idea.
Praise the Lord.
And Zahn and Brad Zahn and Jake Chapman. An interesting thing, all 3 of their districts were redistricted and reconfigured to favor Democrats.
Is that right?
Yeah, kind of interesting.
I was going to say there's a whole nother conversation in that, with redistricting and some of the potential plans they have for future redistricting. I think that we have to be cognitive of and cautious. But yeah, I think that at the end of the day, when you look at Scripture, Psalm 127:3, the Lord says, "Lo, children are the heritage of the Lord, and the fruit of the womb is my reward." They're His. These kids are on His. They're on loan to us. My wife and I take that seriously with our sons. Lord willing, I'm going to be a grandpa soon. My son got married last year, and I'm so excited.
You should be. It's one of the best seasons of life you can have.
Yeah, but you look at the world that we're continuing to bring children into, and we're excited to bring these kids into the world, but we see a world that is in decay, and that's why it's so important that men and women of faith are stepping up into these roles that you're pursuing right now. And I think that conversation easily kind of transitions into education and parental rights, like school choice. And, obviously we currently have the education savings accounts, which are an amazing gift. And it is allowing a lot of families to come out of a public school system that they find fault with. I'll tell you, I'm one of those. I'm not in full transparency. I know a lot of amazing public school teachers who do an incredible job.
Great people.
Yes, absolutely, 100%. Administrators, people that really are there for the right reasons, love the kids, and are doing their part, and they're working hard. But that's not the case across the board within our public
No,
school
not at all.
system. I've had issues with a local school board where our kids in the district we were at, and I would go and try to speak my mind, and they wouldn't even look at you. They would, you could look on the screens, and they would be, fiddling on their phones and surfing the web, and they're just uninterested in really hearing from the families. I actually have an email from one of the local school districts here in Cedar Rapids, talking about, and this was a few years ago, and I know that the governor and a lot of folks in the state house have done work to change this, but they were taking kids off school grounds without parent knowledge for
I heard it. I did hear about that. That's crazy.
Sex change, drugs, and medications, and
that's nuts.
all kinds of different things like that. And actually, Planned Parenthood it was even helping teach the health classes within the Cedar Rapids School District.
Awful.
And so you take a step back and you say, well, this isn't the school system that I want to be a part of, and that I want my kids to be a part of. And so, the education savings accounts have been a real breath of fresh air. Of course, there is conflict at the state level as to what they'll look like and how they'll proceed, but we're trusting the Lord in that. But no doubt there's a federal, concept there. What can we do on a federal level to bring that, school choice concept, and maybe solidify it more? Is there?
Sure. Well, when I was in the State House, I actually worked on education savings accounts for years. I don't know if you know that, but I before they were, I worked on them.
Awesome.
My first case that I made was we have school districts in Iowa with low performing proficiencies, and if that's the case, parents need an alternative. They're paying the same tax revenue, and they're not getting the same benefit, and they're in a low-performing school. They should have an alternative. And the governor, to her credit, actually copied my bill of the year following. We didn't get it through, but it got us on a trajectory where the governor saw the merits of ESAs. And if our kids are in failing schools, and we know it, and we're heavily subsidizing it, competition improves quality.
Right.
Accountability. It raises the bar in every metric. We know that. And I certainly have seen that. I've seen some Catholic schools in Iowa that are absolutely knocking it out of the park on proficiency and, standardized testing and things like that. And my own grandkids go to a Christian school in Sioux City. And I'm grateful that our values are reinforced.
Right.
And at the same time, recognizing that we pay in. I'm not the parents, obviously, but, parents who pay that kind of tax revenue on their property taxes now in particular, why do they have no voice?
Right.
So that's what education savings accounts gave. And
there was a season here where my wife and I, we lived in the Linn-Mar School District. We had a number of rental properties in the Linn-Mar School District, so we were paying property taxes on our home, and we were paying property taxes on our rental properties, and we didn't have our kids in the school district. We actually had our kids over at a Christian school. We had 3 children that we were paying for private school education for while we were paying all of our property taxes. So in full transparency, the education savings accounts came along a little after I could take advantage of them, but I loved the heart behind that, and I see the necessity of it, the need for families to be able to say, no, this isn't working. You can go back to the Ma Bell conversation in the 1980s, where the government stepped in and said, well, this phone company is really the only option people have, and so they can charge whatever they want, and they don't have to give you a good product, and it was true. And a lot of people didn't like that the government stepped in and did that. But what happened over the years was they found out that it was a necessary, job that they accomplished by breaking that up into numerous phone companies that then had to fight for, their prospective clients and customers and provide better products and a better service and a better rate of charge. And all of a sudden you had, a market that was functioning well, and the American people were the beneficiary of that.
They did.
And I think that's a great picture of the education savings accounts. I can tell you, in Arizona, before we moved here, we're 17 years in Iowa now, but they had a version of ESAs there prior to us moving. They were called STOs, state tuition organizations. They actually now in Arizona have state STOs and ESAs, and you just have to choose at the beginning of the year which way you're going to go.
Right.
The STOs are a little more legwork for the parent, but you can actually kind of pool the money longer term and actually use them for like Grand Canyon University, things like that, which is a great deal.
Yeah.
But regardless, what's interesting is if you look over the history, I grew up in Arizona taking the Iowa assessment tests. Iowa was the standard of education for the most part for the entire country, but that's not the case anymore because the school system went from education to indoctrination, and I know that's going to offend people and that's not my goal, but at the end of the day, there is indoctrination going on within the school system. You can't go into a public school and not see transgender flags and pride flags hanging. You don't see Christian flags hanging in these schools. And we're not even saying there should be Christian flags hanging in the schools, but we are saying we don't want to see those flags. These places should be ambivalent. There should be no example of any of that. It should be a place of education, history, math, science, and the like. And we've just gone to an arena that's so far removed from that.
And we planted seeds in the hearts and minds of innocent children. And I wrote Iowa's gender identity and bathroom bills before they became the law.
Nice.
And that was the whole purpose of it. I wanted it to be K through 12 and had to negotiate a little bit with the education chair, but she accepted, if I was going to get a subcommittee, it was K through 6. And
but that's a great
little
start.
Kids are like baby birds,
Right.
They just gobble up whatever you tell them.
Right.
And, if you tell a little boy that he might be a girl
Mm-hmm.
and you're a teacher that spends 8 hours a day with them and mom and dad aren't there.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah. It's scary, the kind of influence that the educators have, that they know they have and take advantage of, and that parents overlook.
It's just a few of them, but those few can do a lot of damage.
Absolutely. There's a lot of amazing people in the public school system.
But, and then the bathroom bill, it's unconscionable that a 5-year-old girl should be sharing a restroom with a grown man.
Right.
I mean, how on earth do you, or a locker room?
Right.
It's
absurd.
That's insane.
Yeah.
That a girl should have to change in front of a boy is just insane. So that anyway, that tells you how far removed and how far left we've come, where you're talking elementary age children into being transgender when they're that innocent and that vulnerable, and who's standing up for them when they're that impressionable.
Right. Yeah. And we need the parents' voice to be heard in that conversation. And I think it has to be said also that a lot of the families that are leaving the public school system, they're not even utilizing the ESAs because they've to some degree lost hope or faith in their government, and they're just homeschooling. And I know some amazing families that homeschool, but I also know some that are doing it out of a sense of necessity and aren't really totally sure they're doing it correctly. And so there's a conversation there that needs to be had, because those children also deserve a strong, solid education. And like I said, I want to make sure that you home folks or homeschool folks hear this. I know most of you are doing a great job, but it's not the case across the board. It's just like, the public school system. There's a lot of people doing a great job, but it's not the case. And even the private school system, not every private school is a great school, which I think the ESAs help to expand the private school system, the Christian school system.
Oh, no question.
And what are we finding? We're finding, more, competition in the marketplace. And that competition is good for families because it provides a better product at a lower rate.
Sure.
And, we're seeing that here in our own school, Calvary Christian Academy. That's a selfless plug. But we do see the Lord working mightily in the ranks of our classrooms. Good. And, we're looking forward to, continued growth. We're looking at a kind of a hybrid high school program where we're doing like a trade school within the high school to help these kids see, options for their future outside of, the typical four-year degree. I got nothing against college. I went to Arizona State University. I got nothing against college, but it's not for everybody. And, a lot of people these days are going to college, coming out with a degree that they, will pay on for the next 10 or 20 years. And
Even longer.
and they come into a workplace
Yeah.
that really doesn't have a job for them.
Right.
And so looking at some of the trades, I think, there's a lot
Good
of,
idea.
a lot of value there. Let's talk about agriculture. Northwest Iowa's economy, it runs largely on family farms, livestock, corn, soybeans, ethanol, all the biofuels. Farmers face a lot of input cost, market consolidations, the big four, the meat packers, trade challenges, water quality issues. That's a big conversation right now. What kind of concrete steps would you take on the Senate, with that next farm bill, trade policy, rural infrastructure to keep Iowa family farms viable and even strengthen that, rural community picture?
Well, you just spoke to it. The concentration of markets in agriculture has completely taken the voice of the family farmer off the field. In completely. The input side is a great example of that. We saw corn prices hit $7, $8 a few years ago, and that was wonderful.
Yeah.
And we saw, not coincidentally, a 60%, 70% jump in the cost of inputs the following year.
Right.
The price of corn went down, but the price of inputs didn't. And you basically have four companies running the input side of agriculture, and you also have that, as you said, the meat packers,
right,
the grain traders.
Mm-hmm.
It's it's basically 4, 4, and 4, and there is, in my view, there is collusion, and if farmers are going to get their voice back, you're going to have to break that up. Just like what you said about AT&T. I remember paying crazy phone bills for long distance charges.
Yep.
In college, where it was like $200 for my shocked. Don't have a girlfriend in college who lives 100 miles away.
Right.
But no, but that's what fixed it. It was defined by a free market, and I think that would do a lot to give farmers a voice back.
Sure.
And in the marketplace, and everything that everything that comes into play there. And there was another piece to your question there.
Well, we were talking about water quality and the
water quality.
That's a big issue.
Well, there's unquestionably
a
water quality problem as it relates to the phosphates in
all the
in water,
runoff,
and if you actually the cancer rates associated with phosphates, with glyphosate, that's real.
Yeah, I mean,
and so I guess my question is for these people that want to regulate water quality, do you want to regulate the water after it's been polluted or before? So farmers right now are struggling economically. Instead of spending enormous amounts of money after the water's been polluted, why can't you figure out constructive ways to help farmers out with their bottom line before those phosphates make their way into the water supply?
Well, that conversation to me was important a few years ago, but now we've lived out, in a neighboring county for the last couple of years, and have a little homestead of our own, and surrounded by some of the larger farms, and we have those concerns. Our sons are out there, even though they're not all living with us anymore. I just mentioned we'll soon be having a granddaughter or grandson, either way. I guess maybe I'm leaning one direction. I don't know. But having that issue where it rains and you start to look at the fields across the way and wondering, well, what's coming into my well system, and those are real questions, and it's costly to figure out. Thousands of dollars to test your water, and you can get it done by the state, but you get very little real information as opposed to some of the testing organizations that are costly, but you do get a lot of information that way. So we're certainly looking forward to having some of these questions asked and answered when you get to the Senate floor and start making some noise for the people of Iowa. That's going to be important.
Well, you just got to be careful you don't regulate farmers right out of business.
Yes.
And that there's 28,000 family farms gone with each passing year.
Wow. Is that right?
Yeah, 28,000
Wow.
in the country. So that's a lot of farmers going out of business.
Right.
And when you have a construct that's is heavily regulated and monopolized, what happens to the farm? They get squashed by regulation and by market concentration.
Right.
And they're not being treated fairly. They're just not. And that's the heart of what we have to figure out.
Sure. How to curb the issue without putting all the weight and burden on the farmers that are out there, growing the crops that not just Iowa needs, but America needs.
Yeah.
I agree 100%. I think there's a nice transition in there just to general cost of living and economic pressure in the state of Iowa. I've heard you highlight how, government overregulation and monopolies have driven up housing and healthcare and education,
Awful.
certainly property tax burdens.
Mm-hmm.
These issues, they hit Iowa seniors, even young families, and just the average Joe who's working hard to, put a plate of food on the table at the end of the day.
Sure.
How'd you fight inflation, at that federal level, even reducing a federal debt, promoting free market solutions, giving Iowa families, I think, more control over their own future? I know that's a loaded question, but I'd love to hear your heart. Yeah.
There's a lot there's some really basic things I think you can look at that have played a very substantive role in the cost of living that our young families are facing. I have always kind of had a nose and a gift for I guess exposing corruption. I've done it as a trial lawyer.
Yeah.
And if I thought somebody wasn't being
What a
straight
benefit.
with me, I would research them till the cows came home, and then I'd find that.
Yeah.
I'd find, the linchpin or whatever, and use it in a cross exam. I think we need to look at the role of the Federal Reserve and the role that it has played in the housing sector. So just a real quick scenario. During COVID, we all knew about the subprime mortgage crisis back in 2008, where money was being lent to people who couldn't pay it back.
Right.
Well, that created a housing bubble that some people actually made a lot of money on.
Right.
A lot of bankers made a lot of money on that. They got $1 trillion from our federal government, and a lot of bonuses actually got paid out by people who reinvented incompetence.
Sure.
But the scary part is a lot of those same people that are heads of those banks that consist of the primary dealer banks and the Federal Reserve, there's no accountability.
Right.
So you're dealing with the same, I guess, people. There's no accountability to us. They define credit across the board. They define the value of a dollar across the board. Well, if you print a bunch of money and private equity and hedge fund managers put it into housing, what happens? The price of houses has gone up 45%,
Right.
which means banks are lending more money to cover the extra 45%. And
Right.
if you're investing in that sector, which they have, you've made 45%, which is not bad for you, but here's the downside.
About the rest of us.
But the rest of us got the bill for the 15% inflation
Right.
associated with the trillions that you made, that you're charging our kids more for a house. You're making money hand over fist on the investment side. And we got the bill for the inflation for the money that you printed and invested with no accountability to us. That's a rigged game. I mean, we're not crazy for thinking it's a rigged game. It's a rigged game.
Right.
And Obamacare is another example of that, where premiums are up 200% or more, 300% since Obamacare's inception. He was going to make it affordable. No, actually, he made it very unaffordable.
Right.
And you have a lot of claims adjusters with health insurance carriers practicing medicine without a license to our detriment. And they stopped paying for stuff.
Yeah.
We all know they stopped paying for stuff.
Yeah.
And
that system's broken.
But you know what else is interesting? Their profits went up 200%. So they're like, well, we've got this medical cost issue. No, actually, you have a greed issue.
Right.
Because you have another monopoly. So the Federal Reserve has monopoly control over the money. The top 5 have monopoly control over health insurance. Because there's, if you do the deep dive, there's some collusion there. And then you monopolize student loans to where the federal government's the sole lender.
Oh, wow.
And it's $1.7 trillion that's, guess, privately managed
Right.
to recover the money from our kids with loans that are not dischargeable.
Right.
And, sorry, this is really they have doubled the principal. They have doubled the interest. But you know what else they did to our kids? They compounded the interest so it would take them 2 and 3 times longer to pay off their student
Right.
loan debt. So don't tell me you did it for them. You're
Right.
lying. You're delighted when colleges and universities raise tuition costs because you're going to make more money on the
Right.
sweat and toil of our kids. So don't tell me you did it to make it
Hmm.
affordable.
That's a good point.
You're lying.
Right.
And the Democrat Party has been lying to the American people about compassion. No, it's slavery. It's debt slavery dressed up as compassion.
Right. And so on top of that too, we're also basically setting the national debt on our children and
gosh,
grandchildren
no.
and great grandchildren.
It's a problem now too.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, of course,
Yeah.
the burden we carry is more than any nation
Right.
with 1,000 years ahead of us could handle.
Could ever pay
Yeah.
for it. What, 2008, it was $10 trillion.
Man. It's even hard to comprehend,
It is,
I've
those
seen
kinds of numbers.
illustrations where they bring, things to light.
Mhm.
Man, it blows your mind. And
It's a lot of money.
it is. And we find ourselves in a situation where a lot of the young people today have a really hard time even seeing a future for themselves in some of these arenas because of that. I mentioned my son being married a year ago. They're looking at, he owns a condo. I guess they do now. And they're looking at, maybe buying a home, that starter home, the next phase, or maybe
Right.
even building out towards where we are at. And it's so expensive compared to even 17 years ago when we moved to Iowa and we're buying rental properties. And, we've owned a number of homes here in the state as well. And I mean, it's gone so significantly through the roof that young people, I think, have a hard time even believing they can afford to buy a home and live the
Why
American
shouldn't they?
dream. The American dream is
Right.
fading away for a younger
is.
generation. And we've got to do something to change that.
We have to preserve it.
Yeah, that's a big part of it, and you kind of touched on, I think, my next question: healthcare, affordability, medical freedom. That's
Sure.
the same concept.
It is. But what's the driver? It's greed.
Yeah,
Pharmaceutical companies, mandated vaccinations. What's the driver? Well, I can think of hundreds of billions of reasons.
right. There's a lot of conversation about peptides these days. You know much about that? You see it
You
with
brought that. I talked to my son-in-law about that the other day, about how
you have
they could potentially have a lot of good uses to make
the
people
FDA
healthy.
just unbanned 12. And it's an interesting conversation, not necessarily one we need to have here today,
Right.
but one where you look at the medical community and it does start to make you wonder, because there are avenues of healthcare that the government's keeping from us that have proven
They have.
effective.
Yeah, why?
So that's the question. Why? So that
Yeah.
we can be, forced to, continue to just medicate our issues rather than
Right.
getting better, but that's at least one of the arguments. Let's talk about constitutional freedoms. I know that's a big passion of yours, obviously
Sure.
with the Iowa Liberty Network, through your work there,
Mhm.
you focused on defending constitutional rights, building religious liberties, I think even being an attorney has played into that to some degree for you. Now, what threats to personal liberties, religious expression, limited government concern you most today? How would you work maybe across the aisle or even stand firm in certain areas to protect, Iowans' futures in that regard?
Well, I think we're seeing unprecedented incursion into individual self-determination. I mean, the Constitution for me is a document that says we're going to treat people like human beings here and not like slaves.
Right.
Okay, that's how we're doing business
Amen.
in the U.S. And when you deviate from the Constitution, you basically have slavery, because you're telling people what they can do and cannot do as it relates to their own way they want to define their own lives.
Yeah.
We don't have privacy anymore.
Right.
I fought for Iowa's healthcare workers during COVID because they were mandating unproven, unvetted vaccinations. And
Right.
we're not getting good data on the VAERS side, the Vaccination Adverse Event Reporting System. We're not getting good information. It's so underreported. We have no idea really what has been done.
And there's such limited accountability in that arena anyway. It's
Well, the people that are regulating all of these sectors, a lot of them, not all of them, they come from the very industries as former executives and then they're appointed to regulate them. Yeah,
That's a problem.
Yeah, that's a very real problem,
Yeah.
and I think that's a problem in the pharmaceutical sector. There's no question about that.
Yeah.
Working with actually, Katie Adrian and Lindsay Maher and
It's an
Gabby
amazing
Fissler,
organization, yeah.
the ladies with Informed Choice of Iowa. I met them before COVID even happened, and they were talking about the role of vaccinations once Reagan signed off on the immunity liability for pharma. Then all of a sudden we go from 4 to 70 vaccinations, and our kids are sick as a dog.
Right. Yeah.
The math isn't that hard.
I know, even though they try to turn the page and get you to look somewhere else, it's in that arena, no doubt about it.
It is. Well, again, it goes back to the greed side. So is our government being driven by greed or by the well-being of the people it's supposed to serve?
Right.
I think until we fix how super PACs are and how campaigns are fundraised, my opponent's 70% of her money comes from out of state.
Oh, wow.
You look at her donors from there's just an endless array of a machine, and then you throw in the PACs and the super PACs, and it's no wonder the people have lost their voice.
Sure.
It's because the corporations are now governing us through politicians. I mean, we have become a government that is literally run by corporate special interests, some very powerful ones. And they use the government to spy on us, to vaccinate us through, controlling us through, algorithms. Like the algorithm thing is like a very real big threat because,
100%.
I don't know that people know that a frame is being set.
Right.
In their use of their own computer.
Right. Cell phones, social media, it's all being tracked.
It's all being tracked, and they're feeding you stuff that's affecting the whole way you see things. That's a huge incursion into freedom. That's really...
It's scary.
It's scary is right, because you can program people. Well, what is programming? It's control.
And people think, they're just learning my habits so that they can put products in front of me that I want to buy anyway. I'm like, no. It's so much bigger than that. Yeah, they're learning your habits, but on top of that, they're programming you. They're teaching you what to like and how to like it and when to buy it and what to think.
They are. And the control means freedom's lost in that.
Right.
And people don't know that in many instances, they're feeding on the very thing that's controlling them. And that's getting the loss of humanity. Our value system is being threatened by media because our kids are more interested in being entertained on phones than they are. It's redefining our whole value system of our humanity. And I think it's diminishing, honestly, the amount of value we give to one another, the amount of love we have for one another, which, if you stop loving and caring for your neighbor, are you going to stand up and fight for each other in the battles down the road? No. So you have to shed light. Light is the best antiseptic, whatever you want to call it, antibacterial.
Right.
We gotta get the light and the truth out there and make our case and be smart about it.
That's what Jesus said. Let your light so shine before men that they'll see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. Matthew chapter 5. And I got to tell you, I think that it's a concept that's lost on a lot of people today. Of course, Jesus was talking about the light of the gospel of salvation, but ultimately, we have to take that and make that our premier focus, but also understand that it does go over into and can be used that criteria in other areas of our lives, and standing up for the freedoms of American citizens. Paramount. We've only got a few minutes left. I want to ask you about the Second Amendment. There's a lot of conversation. Actually, just yesterday, there was a bunch of rule changes sent down. I don't know if you saw that.
No, I didn't see that.
Oh boy, I read through the list and it was rather confusing. Some of it involved automatic weapons, and I reached out to a friend of mine that is actually an NFA attorney. and just primarily dealing with firearms issues. And he read through the thing and still didn't understand it. So we're going to have to wait and to see how they press it out. But where do you stand with Second Amendment? I'm pretty sure I know, but Iowa probably is interested.
Well, the Second Amendment was put there primarily, in my view, to address the threat of government tyranny.
100%.
It's not about going deer hunting.
Right.
It's about protecting yourself and your family, and it's also a deterrent to government tyranny. Right. And I'm a veteran. I can understand the value of the Second Amendment, on something of a military perspective. Right. Like, if you disarm the people, history does not speak well of governments that have disarmed their own people. Actually, usually some pretty horrible things followed shortly thereafter in Nazi Germany.
And say the list, Hitler,
China,
Mussolini,
all of them.
Yeah.
And that was one of the first things that they saw as being indispensable. I mean, there's basically two kinds of people that don't want you to be armed.
Right.
Criminals and tyrants.
There it is. I love it.
So yeah, that's, I own I own an AR-10, and I gave my grandson an AR-15, and I want him to know how to be able to use an AR-15 and be able to shoot with some proficiency.
That's the key.
Yeah, you got to be able to defend yourself, defend your family, and defend your freedom. And that's where I'm at on that, and that's why I think our founders put it in there.
I love it, and I think that America needs to hear more of that from the men and women that are running for and that hold public office. We have a right, and it's important that as Americans we stand up for that. As we close out, what would you like to share with the folks that are going to listen to this?
Sure.
Something that maybe they don't know about you, and then make sure they know how to get a hold of you, website, that kind of thing.
Okay. I think the first thing anybody should do before they vote for somebody is to find out where they came from and what they did.
Yep.
And I would encourage anybody to do the research on the work that, I, with my Senate colleagues, worked on at the State House from 2017 to 2023. You'll learn a lot about me, and what you're going to find out is I look after the interests of people. I almost see it as a ministry of sorts. Your job is to look after people. That's what you do. That's why you're there. And enjoyed some really good, meaningful success in that regard. And that kind of frame is the same kind of frame I'd bring to the federal office. Why take it up to the next level? Well, because the potential for influence to do good things is multiplied at the next level. There's a 1, 2, 3 vote gap between the Republicans and the Senate. Right? I think it's going to be closer, which means the influence associated with the vote is substantively more, and you'll be in a position to have more influence about the things we care about, the things we've talked about today on a federal level. And that's what I would be doing. I'm not going to tell you that I'm going to fix everything, but I am going to represent the people of this country. I am going to put the interests of America first, and I'm going to honor the oath I swear to the Constitution before God on behalf of the people in this country.
Well, thank you. I for one, appreciate that. So how do people find you?
CarlinForUSSenate.com.
CarlinForUSSenate.com.
Right. They can donate. They can get, if they would like to volunteer, door knock, yard sign, all of those things are on our website, and we'd love to get their help. This is, this isn't a candidate thing. This is a cause that people of faith that love this country, that love the Constitution, we share it. We share the responsibility of it. Faith isn't just, faith is a duty. Faith is supposed to be active. I mean, you're supposed to live by your faith. That means there should be an active side to your faith, and that's why we do what we do.
Amen. Well, I appreciate that, sir. Thank you for coming out and joining me today on Grassroots Iowa. Thank you to all of you for listening, tuning in. Make sure that you share this with your friends and your family, and take some time. What's that website again?
CarlinForUSSenate.
CarlinForUSSenate.com. Take some time, get over there, get to know him, reach out, volunteer, whatever it might be. Again, thank you for tuning in. May God bless you today.